The coffin lid was now shut. The priest spoke the final words. The crowd slowly walked away, but underground. The person inside was still alive. For centuries, being buried alive was not a rare nightmare. It was a terrifying possibility that haunted millions. Long before modern medicine, doctors could not reliably tell the difference between death and deep unconsciousness. A slow pulse, shallow breathing, or temporary paralysis was often mistaken for the end of life. People were pronounced dead while they were still breathing. In the 18th and 19th centuries, diseases like cholera, typhus, epilepsy, and catalepsy caused the body to appear lifeless. Victims became cold, rigid, and unresponsive. With no heart monitors, no brain scans, families had no choice but to trust the doctor's word. And doctors were often wrong. Burials happened fast. Fear of disease spreading forced bodies into graves within hours. Coffins were sealed tight. Graves were deep. Once buried, there was no escape. But evidence later revealed a horrifying truth. When graves were reopened, coffins were found scratched from the inside. Fingernails were broken. Faces were frozen in terror. Bodies were twisted. Knees pulled toward the chest, as if the person had desperately tried to move. These were documented discoveries. This fear became so widespread that it entered everyday life. People spoke openly about it. Writers described it. Doctors debated it. Being buried alive became one of the greatest anxieties of the human mind. Not dying, but waking up too late. Some people demanded their coffins stay open 4 days. Others refused burial unless their body showed signs of decay. Families delayed funerals as long as possible, watching closely for any movement, any breath, any sign of life. Stories spread of people waking up inside their coffins, screaming until their lungs collapsed, their voices unheard beneath meters of earth. The darkness, the lack of air, the crushing realization that no one was coming. It was a death slower than death itself. As panic grew, inventors tried to solve the problem. Special safety coffins were designed, fitted with bells, flags, and breathing tubes. If someone woke up underground, they could ring for help. Yet there is no record that a single bell ever saved a life. The truth is darker. Most victims never woke up in time. Others woke up briefly before oxygen ran out. Their final moments were spent alone, trapped, and fully conscious. Being buried alive was a systemic failure of early medicine. No one knew how many it happened to. Records were incomplete. Death certificates were unreliable. Many cases were never discovered. Thousands vanished into the ground without anyone ever knowing the truth. This was not horror fiction. This was history. By the middle of the 19th century, the fear of being buried alive was no longer irrational panic. It was a logical response to a terrifying reality. Medicine simply did not know how to define death. Doctors relied on surface signs, stillness, pale skin, a weak pulse. Many illnesses could mimic death almost perfectly. Cholera, typhus, epilepsy, hypothermia, and catalepsy could slow the body to a near standstill. People could appear lifeless for hours or days, and sometimes they woke up. The problem was structural ignorance. In the 1800s, death certificates were often issued within minutes. Families were pressured to bury the body quickly. Once buried, there was no second chance. Newspapers across Europe and America began publishing stories that read like horror fiction, but were verified reports. A man in France collapsed and was pronounced dead. During his funeral, mourners heard knocking from the coffin. When opened, he was alive and terrified. In England, a woman in a coma was buried. Grave robbers later found her body turned sideways, nails broken, and the coffin scratched raw. Medical journals began using a new phrase, premature burial. The fear spread beyond the poor to the educated elite. Some demanded long delays before burial. Others requested autopsies while still dead, or even decapitation to ensure finality. The coffin became a symbol of dread, inventors rushed to design solutions, leading to the creation of safety coffins. These were equipped with bells, ropes, and breathing tubes. A string was tied to the buried person's hand. If they moved, a bell would ring. Graveyards became guarded spaces. Men were paid to sit through the night, listening for bells, but the system was flawed. Decomposition caused movement. Bells rang for the dead. Guards grew numb to false alarms. Eventually, when a bell rang, no one came. Worse still, many safety coffins failed entirely. Breathing tubes clogged, bells jammed, ropes snapped. Hope was buried with the body. Governments tried waiting mortuaries. In Munich, Paris, and Berlin, bodies were placed in special halls and monitored for days. Mirrors were placed under noses to detect breath. Heated spoons were applied to skin. Electric shocks were tested. Some people woke up. Those who did became living proof of how close humanity had been to catastrophic era. Yet these systems were not universal. Rural areas lacked facilities. During epidemics, speed mattered more than certainty. And speed killed. The true horror was awareness. Victims were conscious for several minutes. Panic would spike oxygen consumption. Heart rates would explode. The limited air inside a coffin would vanish rapidly. Death would follow, not peacefully, but violently, claustrophobic, desperate. Alone, no screaming could escape. No one could hear. This knowledge haunted the era. Art and literature became obsessed with this boundary. Edgar Allan Poe wrote about premature burial as social commentary. His stories reflected a collective terror rooted in real events. Eventually, medicine began to change. The invention of the stethoscope allowed doctors to listen more carefully. Later, electrocardiograms made heart activity visible. The real breakthrough was the understanding of brain death. Death was defined not by breath or pulse, but by irreversible loss of brain function. That discovery ended centuries of uncertainty. Today, being buried alive is extraordinarily rare because science learned how to recognize death. Yet the cemeteries of the past remain silent witnesses. Beneath old headstones, there may be graves that hold stories never told. Stories of people who were not dead, only mistaken. History remembers their fear and reminds us how thin the line once was.